Good morning, my friends. Happy Friday. Where you going, bud? Come lay down. Don't be stressing me today. Lay down. Good morning, Connie. All right, April 22nd. David becomes king of all of Israel. Whoop, whoop. All right, 2 Samuel 5, 1 through 3, which is 1002 BC. Then all the tribes of Israel went to David at Hebron and told him, "We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, when Saul was our king, you were the one who really led the forces of Israel. And the Lord told you, 'You will be shepherd of my people Israel. You will be Israel's leader.'" So there at Hebron, King David made a covenant before the Lord with all the elders of Israel, and they anointed him king of Israel. Sebastian, get in your bed, please. Get in your bed. You're distracting the mumsy. Lay down. Thank you. 1 Chronicles 11, 1 through 3. Then all of Israel gathered before David at Hebron and told him, "We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, even when Saul was king, you were the one who really led the forces of Israel. And the Lord your God told you, 'You will be the shepherd of my people Israel. You will be the leader of my people Israel.'" So there at Hebron, David made a covenant before the Lord with all the elders of Israel, and they anointed him king of Israel, just as the Lord had promised through Samuel. 1 Chronicles 12, 23 through 40. These are the numbers of armed warriors who joined David at Hebron. They were all eager to see David become king instead of Saul, just as the Lord had promised. From the tribe of Judah, 6,800 warriors armed with shields and spears. From the tribe of Simeon, there were 7,100 brave warriors. From the tribe of Levi, there were 4,600 warriors. This included Jehoiada, leader of the family of Aaron, who had 3,700 under his command. This also included Zadok, a brave young warrior with 22 members of his family, who were all officers. From the tribe of Benjamin, Saul's relatives there were 3,000 warriors. Most of the men from Benjamin had remained loyal to Saul until this time. From the tribe of Ephraim, there were 20,800 brave warriors, each highly respected in his own clan. From the half-tribe of Manasseh, west of the Jordan, 18,000 men were designated by name to help David become king. From the tribe of Issachar, there were 200 leaders of the tribe with their relatives. All these men understood the signs of the times and knew the best course for Israel to take. From the tribe of Zebulun, there were 50,000 skilled warriors. They were fully armed and prepared for battle and completely loyal to David. From the tribe of Naphtali, there were 1,000 officers and 37,000 warriors armed with shields and spears. From the tribe of Dan, there were 28,600 warriors, all prepared for battle. From the tribe of Asher, there were 40,000 trained warriors, all prepared for battle. From the east side of the Jordan River, where the tribes of Reuben and Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh lived, there were 120,000 troops armed with every kind of weapon. All these men came in battle array to Hebron with a single purpose of making David the king over all of Israel. In fact, everyone in Israel agreed that David should be their king. They feasted and drank with David for 3 days, for preparations had been made by their relatives for their arrival. And people from as far away as Issachar, Zebulun, and Naphtali brought food on donkeys, camels, mules, and oxen. Vast supplies of flowers, fig cakes, clusters of raisins, wine, olive oil, cattle, sheep, and goats were brought to the celebration. There was great joy throughout the land of Israel. David conquers the Philistines. 2 Samuel 5, 17 through 25. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king of Israel, they mobilized all their forces to capture him. But David was told they were coming, so he went into the stronghold. The Philistines arrived and spread out across the valley of Rephaim. So David asked the Lord, "Should I go out to fight the Philistines? Will you hand them over to me?" The Lord replied to David, "Yes, go ahead. I will certainly hand them over to you." So David went to Baal-perazim and defeated the Philistines there. "The Lord did it," David exclaimed. "He burst through my enemies like a raging flood." So he named the place Baal-perazim, which means the Lord who burst through. The Philistines had abandoned their idols there, so David and his men confiscated them. But after a while, the Philistines returned and again spread out across the valley of Rephaim. And again, David asked the Lord what to do. "Do not attack them straight on," the Lord replied. "Instead, circle around behind and attack them near the poplar trees. When you hear a sound like the marching of feet in the tops of the poplar trees, be on the alert. That will be the signal that the Lord is moving ahead of you to strike down the Philistine army. So David did what the Lord commanded, and he struck down the Philistines all the way from Gibeon to Gezer. 1 Chronicles 14, 8 through 17. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over all of Israel, they mobilized all their forces to capture him. But David was told they were coming, so he marched out to meet them. The Philistines arrived and made a raid in the valley of Rephaim. So David asked God, "Should I go out to fight the Philistines? Will you hand them over to me?" The Lord replied, "Yes, go ahead. I will hand them over to you." So David and his troops went up to Baal-perazim and defeated the Philistines. "God did it," David exclaimed. "He used me to burst through my enemies like a raging flood." So they called the name Baal-perazim, which means the Lord who burst through. The Philistines had abandoned their gods there, so David gave orders to burn them. But after a while, the Philistines returned and raided the valley again. And once again, David asked God what to do. "Do not attack them straight on," God replied. "Instead, circle around behind and attack them near the poplar trees. When you hear the sound of marching feet in the tops of the poplar trees, go out and attack. That will be the signal that God is moving ahead of you to strike down the Philistine army." So David did what God commanded, and they struck down the Philistine army all the way from Gibeon to Gezer. So David's fame spread everywhere, and the Lord caused all the nations to fear David. David captures Jerusalem, 2 Samuel 5, 6 through 10. David then led his men to Jerusalem to fight against the Jebusites, the original inhabitants of the land who were living there. The Jebusites taunted David, saying, "You'll never get in here. Even the blind and lame could keep you out." For the Jebusites, the Jebusites thought they were safe. But David captured the fortress of Zion, which is now called the City of David. On the day of the attack, David said to his troops, "I hate those lame and blind Jebusites. Whoever attacks them should strike by going into the city through the water tunnel." That is the origin of the saying, "The blind and the lame may not enter the house." So David made the fortress his home, and he called it the City of David. He extended the city, starting at the supporting terraces and working inward. And David became more and more powerful because the Lord, God of heaven's armies, was with him. 1 Chronicles 11, 4 through 9. Then David and all of Israel went to Jerusalem, or Jebus as it used to be called, where the Jebusites and the original inhabitants of the land were living. The people of Jebus taunted David, saying, "You'll never get in here." But David captured the fortress of Zion, which is now called the City of David. David said to his troop, "Whoever is first to attack the Jebusites will be the commander of my armies." And Joab, the son of David's sister Zeruiah, was the first to attack, so he became the commander of David's armies. David made the fortress his home, and that is why it is called the City of David. He extended the city from the supporting terraces to the surrounding area, while Joab rebuilt the rest of Jerusalem. And David became more and more powerful because the Lord of heaven's armies was with him. 1 Chronicles 3, 4b. Then David reigned another 33 years in Jerusalem. 2 Samuel 5:13. After moving from Hebron to Jerusalem, David married more concubines and wives, and they had more sons and daughters. 2 Samuel 5, 4 through 5. David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years in all. He had reigned over Judah and Hebron for 7 years and 6 months, and from Jerusalem he reigned over all of Israel and Judah for 33 years. David's palace, 2 Samuel 5, 11 through 12. The king of Hiram of Tyre sent messengers to David, along with cedar timber and carpenters and stonemasons, and they built David a palace. And David realized that the Lord had confirmed him as king over Israel and had blessed his kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. 1 Chronicles 14, 1 through 2. Then King Hiram of Tyre sent messengers to David, along with cedar timber and stonemasons and carpenters, to build him a palace. And David realized that the Lord had confirmed him as king over Israel and had greatly blessed his kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. David plans to move the ark, 1 Chronicles 13, 1 through 5. David consulted with all of his officials, including the generals and captains of his army. Then he addressed the entire assembly of Israel as follows: "If you approve, and if it is in the will of the Lord our God, let us send messages to all of the Israelites throughout the land, including the priests and Levites in their towns and pasture lands. Let us invite them to come and join us. It is time to bring back the ark of our God, for we neglected it during the reign of Saul." The whole assembly agreed to this, for the people could see it was the right thing to do. David summoned all of Israel, from the Shihor Egypt all the way from the Shihor brook of Egypt in the south and all the way to the town of Lebo Hamath in the north, to join in bringing the ark of God from Kiriath Jearim. The ark brought to Gath, 2 Samuel 6, 1-11. Then David again gathered all the elite troops in Israel, 30,000 in all. He led them to Bela of Judah to bring back the ark of God, which bears the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, who is enthroned between the cherubim. They placed the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from Abinadab's house, which was on a hill. Uzzah and Ahio, Abinadab's sons, were guiding the cart that carried the ark of God. Ahio walked in front of the cart. David and all the people of Israel were celebrating before the Lord, singing songs and playing all kinds of musical instruments, lyres, harps, tambourines, castanets, and cymbals. But when they arrived at the threshing floor of Nacon, the oxen stumbled, and Uzzah reached out his hand to steady the ark of God. Then the Lord's anger was aroused against Uzzah, and God struck him dead because of this. So Uzzah died right there beside the ark of God. David was angry because the Lord's anger had burst out against Uzzah. He named the place Perez Uzzah, which means to burst out against Uzzah, as it is still called today. David was now afraid of the Lord, and he asked, "How can I ever bring the ark of the Lord back into my care?" So David decided not to move the ark of the Lord into the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom of Gath. The ark of the Lord remained there in Obed-Edom's house for 3 months, and the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and his entire household. 1 Chronicles 13, 6-14. Then David and all of Israel went to Bela of Judah, also called Kiriath Jearim, to bring back the ark of God, which bears the name of the Lord, who is enthroned between the cherubim. They placed the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from Abinadab's house. Uzzah and Ahio were guiding the cart. David and all of Israel were celebrating before God with all their might, singing songs and playing all kinds of musical instruments, lyres, harps, tambourines, cymbals, and trumpets. But when they arrived at the threshing floor of Nacon, the oxen stumbled, and Uzzah reached out his hand to steady the ark. Then the Lord's anger was aroused against Uzzah, and he struck him dead because he had laid his hand on the ark. So Uzzah died there in the presence of God. David was angry because the Lord's anger had burst out against Uzzah. He named that place Perez Uzzah, which means to burst out against Uzzah, as it is still called to this day. David was now afraid of God, and he asked, "How can I ever bring the ark of God back into my care?" So David did not move the ark into the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom of Gath. The ark of God remained there in Obed-Edom's house for 3 months, and the Lord blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he owned. So if you're new to devotions with me, the reason I repeat the passages is because this is a chronological Bible. You may know that, but you may not. This is a chronological Bible. And so I'll read a passage from, like the ark brought to Gath, I read 2 Samuel 6, 1-11, and then the same passage happens again, very similar wording, a few words different here and there, happens again in 1 Chronicles. So I read them both because you know what chronological means. You know what it means. Okay, I'll start again Monday. Okay, so we are on day 11. The stinking, rotten, horrible, no good day. I just don't have it in me to stick with this healthy eating thing, Amy said in utter exhaustion. Life had been spinning out of control in every area. Troubled finances, a stressful marriage, struggling family members, and on and on. Because she couldn't control much about her life, Amy felt she could no longer limit her food choices. Food was her numbing drug of choice. 47 pounds later, she sat sobbing on her bathroom floor. What am I doing to myself? She'd been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, and now everything was compounded by all the weight she'd added to her body. As she crawled into bed, she glanced at the photo on her bedside table. There she was, nearly 50 pounds ago, smiling and hugging her husband. Where had that happy girl gone? Where had that happy couple gone? And when was the last time they'd even touched? A deep knot of insecurity twisted in her gut at the thought of her husband seeing her now. The only thing she wanted in that moment was the bag of goldfish crackers and the half carton of Oreos sitting in her pantry. My life is falling apart, and all I can think about right now is goldfish and Oreos. It's a stinking, rotten, horrible, no-good day. Right now would be a really good time for the earth to swallow me up like into a dark hole, or for Jesus to come back. And speaking of Jesus, what an utter disappointment I must be. Amy felt a dark depression slipping over her like a heavy blanket. A blanket so bleak and black she thought it might strangle the life out of her. Ever been there? I have. Isn't it just like Satan to make us think we have something to comfort us, fill us, satisfy us, only to be haunted by the consequences of this comfort later? That's some power right there. Getting a handle on food during hard times. In the previous chapter, we talked about being tempted during times of celebration, but I think it's worth chatting about being tempted to overeat and make poor choices during times of struggle as well, when you just don't feel you have it in you to deny yourself unhealthy foods. Life is already denying you so much. For heaven's sake, everything you want seems out of reach, but these cookies are right here, and they will taste good, and no one has the right to say you can't have them, so there. Obviously, I've been around this mountain a time or two, or maybe 27, but I love what my friend Ruth Graham says about traveling around the same mountain for far too long. Either we can be victimized and become victims, or we can be victimized and rise above it. Often it is easier to play the victim and take off our masks and ask for help. Often it is easier to play the victim than to take off our masks and ask for help. We get comfortable with our victim status. It becomes our identity, and it's hard to give up. The Israelites often played the victim card, and I love what God finally tells them. You have circled around this mountain long enough. Now turn north. Deuteronomy 2:3. Turn north. It's time to move on. Self-pity, fear, pride, negativity paralyze us. Taking off our masks takes courage, but if we don't do it, we will remain in our victim status and end up stunted. Or in the case of overweight and unhealthy, further compounding our feelings of being victimized by our circumstances. So what can we do when we don't have the energy, the fortitude, or the desire to eat healthy? This is an important thing to tackle because if there is one thing I know about life, it will be dotted with the hard times. We have to get a plan to realistically handle them and keep our compasses set to true north. As Ruth stated, an important part of turning north is taking off our masks and asking for help. For me, this starts with taking off my mask before the Lord and asking Him to help me find fulfillment in my relationship with Him. This means I have to admit there's a problem, and I really don't want to do that. Admitting I have a problem will likely require that I make changes, and changes are hard. Food gives such an instant rush and tangible good feelings. It's so much easier to figure out how to get the short-term high of a cookie than it is to get a heart filled up and satisfied with God. I can drive to the store and fill my arms with any kind of cookies I want, but getting filled up with God during a particularly empty feeling day doesn't seem as tangible or as immediate. I know I should pray, but I'm done with praying fake plastic prayers when unhealthy snack options are calling to me and my resolve has worn as thin as a tissue. I have to have another prayer strategy. I have to find a way to be filled up and satisfied with God's love. And a few years ago, I found exactly what I needed, prayers where I don't speak at all. I had been going through some stinking thinking. The word thinking isn't there. I don't know why I just put it there. I had been going through some stinking, rotten, horrible, no good days and was at the absolute end of knowing what to pray. I'd slipped into a habit of praying circumstance-oriented prayers where I'd list out every problem and ask God to please fix them. I even made suggestions for solutions in case my input would be useful. But nothing changed except my waistline. In a huff one day, I sat down to pray and had absolutely no words. None. I sat there staring blankly. I had no suggestions, no solutions. I had nothing but quiet tears and some chocolate smeared across my upper lip. Eventually, God broke through my worn-out heart. A thought rushed through my mind and caught me off guard. I know you want me to change your circumstances, Lisa, but right now I want to focus on changing you. Even perfect circumstances won't satisfy you like letting me change the way you think. I didn't necessarily like what I heard, but at least I felt I was connecting with God. I hadn't felt that in a long time. And so, to keep that connection, I started making it a habit to sit quietly before the Lord. Sometimes I cried. Sometimes I sat with my bad attitude. Sometimes I sat with a heart so heavy I wasn't sure I'd be able to carry on much longer. But as I sat, I pictured God sitting there with me. He was there already, and I eventually sensed that. I experienced what the Apostle Paul taught. The Spirit helps us in our weakness. We do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us through a wordless groan. Romans 8:26. As I sat in silence, the Spirit interceded with perfect prayers on my behalf. I didn't have to figure out what to pray or how to pray about this situation that seemed so consuming. I just had to be still and sit with the Lord. And during those sitting times, I started to discern changes I needed to make in response to my circumstances, none of which included using food for comfort. I think a lot of us try to get filled up with things or people. In my book, Becoming More Than a Good Bible Study Girl, I talk about how I walked around for years with a little heart-shaped cup, holding it out to other people and things, trying to find fulfillment. Some of us hold out our heart-shaped cup to food, or expect relationships to fill up our insecurities. In other situations, it's wanting kids to be successful for a parent's own validation, or overspending the budget because that outfit would provide a temporary good feeling. Whatever it is, if we are really going to stop circling the mountain and head north toward lasting changes, we have to empty ourselves of the lie that other people or things can ever fill our hearts to the fullest. Then we have to deliberately fill up on God's truth and stand secure in his love. The more I do this, the less I find myself pulling out that little heart-shaped cup. I have to mentally replace the lies using some of my favorite verses to remind myself of just how filling God's love really is. Here are some examples of how I can do that. Old lie. I need Oreos. They will fill me up and taste good. The new truth. The thought that those Oreos will fill me is a lie. They will taste good for just a few minutes, and for the few minutes it will take to eat them. Then that hollow feeling of guilt will rush in as soon as the chocolate high dissipates. Do I want to eat right now because I need nourishment or because I'm feeling empty emotionally and spiritually? If I truly need a snack right now, I am capable of choosing a healthier option. This hurts. I don't know if I want to read this anymore. Just kidding. My favorite verse about that. I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know that this love surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all fullness of God. Ephesians 3:17-19. The old lie. I'm such a failure with this healthy eating thing. Why sacrifice instant gratification now when I know eventually I'll just go back to my old habits anyhow? New truth. I am not a failure. I am lavishly loved child of God. Part of my right as a child of God is to operate in a power beyond myself. The Holy Spirit is God's gift to me, so it's possible for me to use self-control I've been given. Oh, this is so good. Let me read that again. I am not a failure. I am a lavishly loved child of God. Part of my right as a child of God is to operate in a power beyond myself. The Holy Spirit is God's gift to me, so it is possible for me to use self-control that I've been given. That says it all. That's the whole book right there. That is amazing. Oh my word. My favorite verse. See what great love the Father has lavished upon us, that we should be called the children of God, and that is what we are. 1 John 3:1. I got the goosies. Old lie. God seems so far away, and French fries are right around the corner at the drive-thru. New truth. French fries don't love me, and the only lasting thing I get from them is the cholesterol and cellulite they leave behind, which will just compound my frustration. God's love is here in this moment. His love is true, and it carries with it only positive residual effects. My favorite verse, from everlasting to everlasting, the Lord's love is with those who fear him. Psalm 103:17. This is just the start of replacing the lies and rationalizations with the truth of God's love. I encourage you to write out some old lies and new truths on your own. The process of stripping away old lies is hard and can produce raw feelings. That's why it's so crucial to have those truths with which to replace them. I pray we are all on this journey of replacing lies, embracing truth, and learning that food was never meant to fill the deepest places of our heart, reserved for God alone. Not on the good days, not on the bad days, and not even on the stinking, rotten, horrible, no good days. Jesus said, "See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut." Revelation 3:8. May it be that we walk through that door, head north, and never look back. Man, oh man, that was a good chapter. This book is phenomenal. Holy moly. All right. So homework. Write down your old lie, write down your new truth, and write down a verse that supports it. Do it. I'll make a post on my page today. Comment on it with your old truth, new truth, old lie, new truth, and verse to support it. I'll do it later today. Get ready. It's coming. I love that. Oh my gosh. I got the goosey goose. Okay. Thank you for joining me this morning. So listen, I've been fighting in my head all morning what I was going to have for breakfast. Okay. I was planning all along to have some yogurt with my Raisin Bran stuff. But then somebody I know, you know who you are, was making pizza eggs, and I was jealous and was like, you know what? I'm going to make pizza eggs because that sounds so good. And yes, pizza eggs are on plan, but I don't need pizza eggs. I know what my body needs in the morning, or this morning, is carbs. I can tell, I can feel it. Even though I want the cheese, I'm going to go for the carbs, the healthy carbs. So I'm going to have a yogurt bowl, and I'm going to show you how Jennifer Overstreet does it. And I'll have pizza eggs for lunch. Thank you guys for joining me. I love this devotion so much. Thank you so much for joining me. And I will be back tomorrow with the next day. I thought this was going to be a 30-day devotional, but I'm wrong. It's only 30 days if you skip the weekends, which I ain't doing. I ain't skipping no weekends. There's only 18 chapters, so there's only 6 days left. We'll be done this next week. And then we will start I'm That Girl. And I am so excited to start I'm That Girl together, you guys. That is going to be another really powerful book. And that one is going to take us a long time to get through because I'm not going to read a full chapter a day. Each chapter is broken down into mini chunks, and I'm going to just read a mini chunk every day, and it's going to last us a fair amount of time. So thank you for joining me. And I will see you back tomorrow morning for more devotions. I love you all. Have a blessed day.